Welcome back from the concurrent sessions. We're now excited to hear from two impressive women about building a just and inclusive economy and the next generation of climate solutions. In their World Ceres Talk, Etasha Cave, co-founder and CSO of Opus 12, and Ceres President's Council member Nicole Systrom, founder of Sutro Energy Group, will discuss how investors and companies can support clean tech entrepreneurs who are creating innovative solutions for a more sustainable future. We'll hear how Etasha started Opus 12, what challenges she overcame, and what financial pathways she took as a young entrepreneur. So over to you, Nicole.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Etasha. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation. So just to orient people, my name's Nicole Systrom. I'm the founder of Sutro Energy Group, which is a consulting firm that works with philanthropists and investors and entrepreneurs to really help accelerate early stage solutions to climate change, which is partly why I'm so excited to be here with you, Etasha. And I've known you for a while, so we're going to have a good time.
Yeah, and likewise, really excited to be here having this conversation with Nicole. And I am the co-founder and chief science officer of Opus 12. And at Opus 12, we are scaling up the world's first industrially sized PIN CO2 electrolyzers. And what a CO2 electrolyzer does is it uses electricity and metal catalyst to convert CO2 into useful products. So imagine a world in which we can utilize renewable electricity to convert CO2 that would have gone into the air, was already in the atmosphere. We convert that CO2 into things like jet fuel and diesel fuel and polymers and other items that we currently use today.
Great. Yes, a lot of possibilities here that we're going to get into. So I think I first met you in 2015. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So I first met Etasha when she joined the initial cohort of a program called Cyclotron Road, which is now evolved into an organization called Activate. But essentially, it's a 2-year fellowship program for early stage entrepreneurs, really scientists working on breakthrough technologies, kind of game-changing technologies. Do you want to just tell us, Etasha, a little bit about the beginnings of Opus 12? And really, I think for this audience, you have a really interesting story to tell around all the ways things were financed, especially in the early days, I think. Maybe you're more sort of in a normal groove now, but would love to hear about that. That'd be great.
Yeah, so Opus 12 got started, I would say, one day when I approached my former lab mate, Kendra Kuhl, who's now another co-founder of Opus 12. And I said, we've been working on the basic science side of understanding how metal catalysts can convert CO2 into useful products. What do you think about looking to scale that up? And we then eventually teamed up with Nicholas Flanders, who's in the business school at Stanford. And the three of us started what was then to become Opus 12. And in those early days, I think at least I sort of naively thought that, 3 Stanford graduate students, we could just easily go to Sand Hill Road and ask for money and would get it to work on our idea. Very quickly realized that wasn't the case, and then realized we needed to build a prototype. In order to build a prototype, we needed lab space, we needed all this expensive equipment. And at this time, I was been a grad student for many, many years, and I was broke. I didn't have the money to do all these things. So we had to figure out, how are we going to take ideas for scaling up a technology that's been in academia for many years, and how do we bring that into industry and kind of map out the technical milestones and bring in the finances. And so Cyclotron Road was a key first step in that. By giving us access to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, we could utilize the expensive equipment that was there and build our first prototype. We could hire scientists. We could apply for federal R&D grants through the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, NASA. And these organizations have these small business innovation research grants that we could apply to. And that attracted, getting even additional funding for our project. And then with having this both technical review by these agencies and having funding that we could leverage. We could bring in private investors who are mission aligned. Our initial investors were in the philanthropic space, and then eventually family offices, and now we've attracted institutional investors. But every step along the way, we've leveraged different sources of funding in order to bring all these different persons to the table, and we're still looking to navigate how to finance this technology, because it is can be capital intensive compared to other sort of startups in different spaces and startups in general.
I mean, so you really, my sense watching you and your team, like you really worked hard at building all sorts of relationships with all kinds of funders, really kind of simultaneously from the beginning, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think was so great about being able to have that initial funding from the fellowship program at Cyclotron Road and then the SBIR funding, because we could take the time to build relationships. We could talk to investors, talk to family offices, talk to philanthropic support without necessarily needing money right away. And we could explain the technology. We could see if there was alignment, identify persons who would potentially be interested. And then by the time we were looking to raise money in the private sector, we already had the relationship and kind of had established credibility along the way. And so that's just been a really key part of building an ecosystem and building support along our team.
And then I think beyond just like direct financial support too, I believe just partnering with corporate manufacturers was a way that you guys really helped drive progress early at the really early days as well. Is that right?
Yeah, we were able to leverage decades worth of investment that had gone into an analogous technology in the water electrolyzer space, and we could do a joint development agreement with the company that helped us get our product to market a lot quicker.
Yeah. No, I think that's one thing that I love about your story is that it really does kind of reach into all sorts of parts of the ecosystem, which I think is so important for the Ceres audience, which, is such a rich ecosystem with so many kinds of stakeholders. And I think, your story really illustrates some larger trends, right? Which is these early stage, capital intensive startups trying to be pretty creative about how they move technologies forward. And, some of that is done through sort of traditional financing, things that look like venture. But one thing that I think is really heartening is seeing the big corporate players start to think more critically about how they can be involved with early stage startups, which I think is even more essential given that, I don't think it's on your product roadmap for people to be converting CO2 in their homes, right? It's like your eventual customers are large industrial players, and that really understanding that kind of customer and having the muscle, being able to flex the muscle around corporate partnership early on, I think is, I think it's going to be really essential to your long-term growth.
Yeah, and there again too, we could build relationships by leveraging these grants. We would bring on corporate partners to write letters of support, and we still do.
Yeah.
Corporate partners write letters of support, and those have been really helpful in kind of aiding us getting these grants. Also in, again, like building the relationship, and they can start to understand our technology and understand what use cases we have, and then we can just sort of build up to doing larger projects, doing a pilot and a demo, and then the full commercial scale at some point.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what other challenges beyond the financing did Opus 12 face in terms of moving forward and making good progress here?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was making sure that the economics and the customers were there.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're writing these grants, like to the National Science Foundation, they have a huge mandate to make sure they're supporting companies that are going to be scalable and that have actual customers, as opposed to what can sometimes happen with engineers, where we sort of have a technology, and we're like looking for a problem to fit it in. So they wanted to make sure that our technology would solve an existing problem and be a value proposition for existing customers. So like getting those introductions, being able to talk to the right person in a company, understanding how to navigate within large companies, all that's been really, really helpful from various partners within the ecosystem, both, persons who directly invested in us, and as well as accelerators and incubators that we've been a part of, and just people in the space that maybe aren't supporting us financially, but care about the mission and want to help us out.
When you think about those corporate partners, those investors who've like really helped you, are there any like major characteristics you would think about in terms of like how those partners sort of treat startups, or like what questions they asked you, or I don't know, any sort of advice for the larger corporate players and investors in the audience about how to support companies like yours?
Yeah, I would say our biggest traction has been where there was some type of program or framework that was established by the company. So, for example, Techstars works with Equinor to establish a Techstars Equinor program, and we were a part of that. And there, my co-founder Nicholas was housed within Equinor for 3 months, and got to understand who the different players were in the different departments and who would be the champions and things like that. And so that we've seen work quite well. But we've also just being introduced to the person who will be the champion for us and help us navigate the internal procedures and protocols within a company has also been a huge fit. So, sometimes it's not the first person we talk to in that company, but being introduced to other players that are the right person. And maybe sometimes it's like the innovation team, or sometimes it's the R&D team, or sometimes it's like the product team working with maybe the marketing team or something. So it's just finding the lower hanging fruit. Yeah.
It's interesting that you sort of like run through that list of people, because I think it points to, again, a larger trend that I'm seeing, which is to see really just a sort of an explosion of creativity about how all these players work together to support early stage startups. I think like even just from a corporate perspective, right? Like we're seeing big corporate players make large announcements around like direct investment funds that they're going to make, like Microsoft and Amazon being sort of the big marquee names recently. But I think there are more and more companies thinking about how to use their corporate philanthropy to support early stage startups. And then, I think again, some of the experiences you've had, right? And how do you partner creatively between a large corporate incumbent and a more nimble startup to sort of drive that technology forward in an efficient way, but then also, lay the groundwork for later customer relationships, which I think are ultimately sort of key piece of getting this all going, right? Someone's got to buy the technology and install it. So earlier I asked you about your advice for investors and corporates, and I want to just flip that around, because you are, I think, one of the few startups, unfortunately, most startups don't make it, right? And Opus 12 has just made some incredible progress, and it's been so exciting to watch your journey. I want to ask you sort of the flip side question, like what advice would you have for entrepreneurs who you see are getting started now, so that they can hopefully replicate some of your success?
Yeah, and I do want to say we still have many miles to go before we
for sure
to get to out there. And we're just getting started. But yeah, what I would say to earlier stage entrepreneurs is to make sure to bring a solid team around you. I mean, we've been able to do a lot, and a lot of that is because both Nicholas and Kendra and our entire team of mostly scientists and engineers that we've hired are just stellar. They're super committed to the mission of the company. And we've been able to do a lot because they've been really nimble and flexible and really aggressive with us and going after these different partnerships and different projects. So I would say that's super key, is attracting people who are committed to the mission and really want to have it be successful.
Great. Yeah. It all comes down to the people at the end of the day, right? Who you're working with. Well, wonderful. That's great advice. I think with that, we'll wrap up the talk, and I'll just say thank you again so much. Always love chatting with you, and it's really a treat to get to talk about some of our shared history.
Exactly. Yeah. The past, I guess, 6 years have been great. So yeah, I look forward to many more to come.
Yep, for sure.